The wound is the place where the light enters you. Rumi. Through love, all that is bitter will be sweet. Through love, all that is copper will be gold. Through love, all dregs will become wine. Through love, all pain will turn to medicine. Rumi. Introduction. The origin of Sufism. Among the Mohammedans, Sufism, or Persian mysticism, is known as tasawwuf. The word sidi is derived from suf, meaning wool. When a little Persian sect at the end of the 8th century AD broke away from the orthodox Muslim religion and struck out on an independent path, they ignored costly robes and worldly ostentation and clad themselves in a white wool garment. Hence they were known as wool wearers, or Sufis. Professor Edward G. Brown gives 4 theories in regard to the origin of Sufism. 1. Esoteric doctrine of the Prophet. 2. Reaction of the Aryan mind against the Semitic religion. 3. Neo-Platonist influence. 4. Independent origin. Neither of the 4 theories altogether satisfies the learned professor, and very certain it is that the last mentioned theory is of very little account. Professor Brown seems in favor of a spontaneous growth existing in various forms, under various names throughout the civilized world. But after all, this is not very tangible evidence. Moreover, we must bear in mind that the Neo-Platonist philosophers paid a visit to the Persian court in the 6th century AD and founded a school there in the reign of Nushir I. It is highly probable, therefore, that these 7 philosophers, forced to leave their homes through the tyranny of Justinian, who forbade the teaching of philosophy at Athens, should have had considerable influence upon a few of the more thoughtful Persians. We shall now find that this theory is borne out by internal evidence. Let us briefly study the tenets of Neoplatonism. The Neoplatonists believed in the supreme good as the source of all things. Self-existent, it generated from itself. Creation was the reflection of its own being. Nature, therefore, was permeated with God. Matter was essentially non-existent, a temporary and ever-moving shadow for the embodiment of the divine. The Neo-Platonists believed that by ecstasy and contemplation of the all-good, man would rise to that source from whence he came. These points bear directly upon the Sufi teaching. They form a broad outline of the tenets of Sufism. The Sufis, from temperamental and other causes, elaborated these ideas, gave them a rich and beautiful setting, and, what is all important, built about them one of the most interesting phases of mystical poetry the world has ever known. And this particular phase may be said to date from the 12th century AD. Thus, I think it will be readily admitted that the Sufis certainly owed something to the Neoplatonists. The cry for the beloved was in their hearts before the Greek philosophers came, but Neoplatonism appealed to their oriental minds. It was a stepping stone across the river of their particular spiritual tendencies, and they trod thereon and proceeded to lay down other stones across the stream. I have pointed out the similarities between this particular Greek and Persian belief. There was, however, one very important difference. The Neoplatonists' conception of God was purely abstract, the Sufis essentially personal, as far as the early Sufis were concerned. We shall consider other influences which were brought to bear upon Sufism a little later on. There is a very great difference between the early Sufism and the elaborate additions that followed as an evolutionary matter of course. In brief, then, Neoplatonism was the doctrine of ecstasy. A quotation from the letter of Plotinus to Flaccus on ecstasy will still further show the similarities between this Greek and Persian teaching. The wise man recognizes the idea of the good within him. This he develops by withdrawal into the holy place of his own soul. He who does not understand how the soul contains the beautiful within itself seeks to realize beauty without, by laborious production. His aim should rather be to concentrate and simplify, and so to expand his being, instead of going out into the manifold to forsake it for the one, and so to float upwards towards the divine fount of being whose stream flows within him. This is Sufism in prose. The Sufi turned the same conception into poetry. The early Sufis. Abu Hashim, born 150 AH or Anno Hejri, was the first to bear the name of Sufi, while Dhul Nun al-Misri, 245 AH, may be said to have given Sufism its permanent shape. Rabia of Basra was the first woman to join the sect, and her saintliness and wise sayings have been preserved by Farid ud-Din Attar. One day a great sickness fell upon Rabia, and on being asked the reason for it, she replied, "I dwelt upon the joys of paradise, and therefore my beloved has chastened me." Rabia did not believe in earthly marriage. Her remark on the subject is given as follows: "The bonds of wedlock have descended upon me. I am not my own, but my Lord's, and must not be unfaithful to him." Attar also informs us that when Rabia was asked if she hated the devil, she replied, "My love to God leaves me no time to hate him." Rabia was a woman of much independence of thought, ethical rather than metaphysical in her remarks, and strongly opposed to outward ceremonials. She is said to have died at Jerusalem, 753 AD. It was at Ramla in Palestine that a Christian nobleman built a convent for the Sufis. Thus, in the early days, the sect defied their prophet's condemnation of monkery by building an abode for members of the order. The Sufis were strongly opposed to the idea of free will or distinct and self-existent personality apart from the beloved. The orthodox Muslims' idea was precisely the reverse. The Sufis have always made the Quran their textbook. With infinite license, they ingeniously quote therefrom, and still more ingeniously add their own explanations when necessary. No doubt there were political reasons for adopting this method of concealing heterodox ideas under the cloak of orthodoxy. We shall see, however, as the sect grew and still further broadened its views, that these clever compromises did not prevent the appearance of martyrs among their number in the future. By the end of the 2nd century of the Hijra, the Sufis were a much respected religious order. In the following century, Quietism had not only changed to pantheism, but pantheism had kindled a belief that beloved and lover were identical. The step was inevitable, and at this juncture it was that Sufism became essentially mystical, and it became more mystical as years advanced. About this time, the beginning of the 3rd century AH, we come across two interesting Sufis who seem to have been the prime movers in this new development. By name Bayazid and Mansur al-Hallaj. Concerning the saint Bayazid, an interesting story is told in the 4th book of the Masnavi. The saint surprised his disciples one day by saying, "Lo, I myself am God Almighty. There is no God beside me. Worship me." The disciples, thinking their master was beside himself, told him when the strange ecstasy had passed what he had said. Bayazid promptly replied, "If I do so again, straightway slay me." His disciples accordingly sharpened their knives. Once more Bayazid cried out, "Within my vesture is naught but God, whether you seek him on earth or heaven." The disciples, horror-struck at his remarks, straightway plunged their knives into Bayazid's body. But their blades were turned back against their own throats, so that they died. He explained to the few disciples who had not struck him that the ecstasy he had been experiencing annihilated self. His form is vanished. He is a mere mirror. The disciples who had struck him saw their own faces in that mirror, and so wounded themselves, and not Bayazid, whose soul had left the mirror of his body and was one with the beloved. Perhaps the life of Mansur al-Hallaj is even more interesting. Whether he was a mere adventurer or genuine exponent of Sufism is still open to controversy among modern Sufis. It will be perfectly safe to describe him as either a saint or a vagabond. He was possibly both extremes to suit the necessities of a very exciting and eventful career. He was born in the close of the 9th century AD and was said to perform many miracles, such as raising the dead to life and drawing gold and flowers from the air. According to his own belief, he could write verses equal to those of the Koran. He went one better than the Superman theory, however, and called himself God and his disciples after the various prophets. Akbar was called God, but deification in this case did not sound from his own trumpet. It sounded from the trumpet of an enthusiastic poet. See Akbar and you see God. Al-Hallaj visited India for the purpose of studying magic, and there saw the celebrated rope trick, on that occasion performed by a woman, a point of considerable interest. This mystic adventurer wrote 46 books, and certainly gained considerable influence over the lower classes by his many signs and wonders. He is said to have disputed the necessity of making a pilgrimage to Mecca by stating that by occult practices it could be performed equally well in any room. On a certain occasion, however, we cannot help but admire Al-Hallaj's wit and aptitude. One day he stretched forth an empty hand and produced from the air an apple, which he asserted he had plucked from paradise. One of his witnesses disputed his assertion because this particular apple was maggot-eaten and therefore not of divine origin. Al-Hallaj at once replied, "It is because it hath come forth from the mansion of eternity to the abode of decay. Therefore to its heart hath corruption found its way." Al-Hallaj, on account of his various heretical teachings, was imprisoned and subjected to all manner of cruelties. Bravely he went forth to the place of crucifixion. For 4 days he was nailed on a cross on both sides of the Tigris. From these tortures he was finally released. 10 years later he was executed, telling his disciples he would return to them in 30 days, and exultantly reciting poetry he cried, "From his own cup he bade me sup, for such is hospitality." A comment of his on Sufism, a very ironical one, was, "That which is mine, for by God I never distinguished for a moment between pleasure and pain." Yet another characteristic saying of his was, "The way to God is 2 steps, 1 step out of this world and 1 step out of the next world, and lo, you are there with the Lord." Whatever were the faults of Al-Hallaj, and there were many, at least it may be said of him that he was a brave man. With all his fanaticism, his absurd indiscretion, and love of conjuring, he left much behind of permanent value to the Sufis. The government in those days did all in its power to restrain the publicity of his books, but a light that was never for a moment set under a bushel cannot be hid. The very attempt to obliterate it is in itself the cause for a keener and more persistent search. In the 5th century of the Hijra, we may note Abu al-Khair as the first to give Sufism political significance, and Imam Ghazali as the first to give it a metaphysical basis. At this time, we find in Sufi books many terms borrowed from the Neoplatonists. Books on ethics as well as poetry now became impregnated with Sufi ideas. Life of Rumi. Jalaluddin Rumi was born at Balkh on September 30th, 1207 AD, or according to the Mohammedan reckoning, in 604 AH. His father, Bahauddin, was a man of much learning, but gave offence to the reigning king by an attack on that monarch's innovations. Another account disputes this in the place of jealousy on the part of the king. Whatever the cause, however, Bahauddin left Balkh together with his family and settled at Nishapur. It was here that the celebrated Sufi Fariduddin Attar presented young Jalaluddin Rumi with his Asrar-Nama and informed his father that the child would someday become famous throughout the world. After the destruction of Balkh, the family went to Konya, an old Roman province where the poet acquired his name, Rumi, or the Roman. Young Jalal must have been a child prodigy if we are to believe the many wonderful stories of his early days. At 6 years of age, he is said to have seen visions, taught his playmates philosophy, and performed many marvelous feats, such as flying into the celestial regions. On the death of his father, Jalal took the professorial chair. He also founded an order of dervishes known as Molavis, where he authorized music and religious dance. When asked why he introduced singing and dance at a funeral, such practice being contrary to custom, Jalal replied, "When the human spirit, after years of imprisonment in the cage and dungeon of the body, is at length set free and wings its flight to the source whence it came, is not this an occasion for rejoicing, thanks, and dancing?" Jalal was an indomitable optimist. In his sayings, and still more in his poetry, we find an almost untrammeled ecstasy. The religious dances known as Raisa Kuli may in some way account for Jalal's occasional lack of care displayed in his poetry, and also for the outbursts not far removed from insanity. We are informed by Daulat Shah that there was a pillar in the Maulavi's house, and when he was drowned in the ocean of love, he used to take hold of that pillar and set himself turning round it. It was while turning round the pillar that he not infrequently dictated much of his poetry, as Mr. Arthur Symons has sung, "I turn until my sense, dizzied with waves of air, spins to a point intense, and spires and centres there." We can well imagine Jalal writing the following under the conditions just mentioned. "Come, come, thou art the soul so dear, revolving. Come, come, thou art the cedar's spear, revolving. Oh, come, the well of light up bubbling springs, and morning stars exult, in gladness sheer, revolving." Shamsi Tabriz. A word must now be said about Shamsi Tabriz, an intimate friend of Jalal. We have sufficient evidence to prove that Shamsi Tabriz, Jalal's nom de guerre, was an actual person and not a mythical creation on the part of the poet. This mysterious being, who flitted across Jalal's life so tragically, seems to have had great personal influence over the poet, who went with him into solitary places and there discussed profound mysteries. The scholars of Jalal looked upon the whole affair as an unworthy infatuation on the part of their master, and on the part of Shams a shameful seduction. Their protests brought about the flight of Shams, who fled to Tabriz, but it was only a momentary separation. Jalal followed this strange figure and brought him back again. Most of his lighter poetry was composed during this separation. Another disturbance, however, caused the departure of Shams to Damascus. We then have no clear record of him. Various legends exist in regard to the death of this mysterious person. It may be safely stated, however, that Shams met with a violent death, the exact nature of which it is impossible to say definitely. This strange union is by no means unique in the history of the world's literature. The union, however, in this particular case is extremely difficult to rightly fathom. We may reasonably infer that Jalal's intense poetic temperament became fascinated by the dogmatic and powerful Shams. The very treatment of this friendship, both in lyrical poems and in the Masnavi, is Sufi. The two following quotations, from many that might be cited, will prove sufficient to illustrate this point. The face of Shamsi-Din, Tabriz's glory, is the sun in whose track the cloud-like hearts are moving. O Shamsi Tabriz, beauty and glory of the horizons, what king but is a beggar of thee with heart and soul? The Divani Shamsi Tabriz. Selected excerpts. I am silent. I am silent. Speak thou, O soul of soul of soul, from desire of whose face every atom grew articulate. A cry to the beloved. Yestereve I delivered to a star tidings for thee. Present, I said, my service to that moon-like form. I bowed, I said, bear that service to the sun who maketh hard rocks gold by his burning. I bared my breast, I showed it the wounds. Give news of me, I said, to the beloved whose drink is blood. I rocked to and fro that the child, my heart, might become still. A child sleeps when one sways the cradle. Give my heart babe milk, relieve us from its weeping, O thou that helpest every moment 100 helpless like me. The heart's home, first to last, is thy city of union. How long wilt thou keep in exile this heart forlorn? Remember God and forget self. O Spirit, make thy head in search and seeking like the water of a stream, and, O Reason, to gain eternal life, tread everlastingly the way of death. Keep God in remembrance till self is forgotten, that thou may be lost in the called, without distraction of caller and call. The Prince of the Fair. A garden, may its rose be in flower to resurrection. An idol, may the two worlds be scattered o'er his beauty. The Prince of the Fair goes proudly forth to the chase at morning. May our hearts fall a prey to the arrow of his glance. From his eye what messages are passing continually to mine. May my eyes be gladdened and filled with intoxication by his message. My body is like the moon. My body is like the moon which is melting for love. My heart like Zura's lute, may its strings be broken. Look not on the moon's waning, nor on Zura's broken state. Behold the sweetness of his affection, may it wax 1,000-fold. Mortality and immortality. What a bride is in the soul! By the reflection of her face may the world be freshened and coloured like the hands of the newly married. Look not on the fleshy cheek which corrupts and decays. Look on the spiritual cheek, may it be sweet and agreeable. The dark body resembles a raven, and the body's world winter. Oh, in spite of these two unpleasants, may there be eternal spring. The Beloved, the Divine Consoler. Thou who art my soul's comfort in the season of sorrow, thou who art my spirit's treasure in the bitterness of death. That which the imagination has not conceived, that which the understanding has not seen, visited my soul from thee, hence in worship I turn toward thee. By thy grace I keep fixed on eternity my amorous gaze. Accept, O King, the pomps that perish lead me astray, the favour of that one who brings glad tidings of thee. Even without thy summons is sweeter in mine ear than songs. If a never-ceasing bounty should offer kingdoms, if a hidden treasure should set before me all that is, I would bend down my soul, I would lay my face in the dust. I would say, of all these the love of such an one for me. Thou art the soul of the world. Eternal life, methinks, is the time of union, because time, for me, hath no place there. Life is the vessels, union the clear draught in them. Without thee, what does the pain of the vessel avail me? I had 20,000 desires ere this. In passion for him not even care of my safety remained. By the help of his grace I am become safe, because the unseen King saith to me, Thou art the soul of the world. The voice of love. Every moment the voice of love is coming from left and right. We are bound for heaven. Who has a mind to sightseeing? We have been in heaven. We have been friends of the angels. Thither, sire, let us return, for that is our country. The beauty of the beloved. O beloved, spiritual beauty is very fair and glorious, but thine own beauty and loveliness is another thing. O thou who art years describing spirit, show one quality that is equal to his essence. Light waxes in the eye at the imagination of him, but in presence of his union it is dimmed. I stand open-mouthed in veneration of that beauty. God is most great is on my heart's lips every moment. The heart hath gotten an eye constant in desire of thee. Oh, how that desire feeds heart and eye! 'Tis slave caressing thy love has practised. Else where is the heart worthy of that love? Every heart that has slept one night in thy air is like radiant day. The water of eternal life. Every form you see has its archetype in the placeless world. If the form perished, no matter, since its original is everlasting. Every fair shape you have seen, every deep saying you have heard, be not cast down that it perished, for that is not so. Whereas the spring head is undying, its branch gives water continually. Since neither can cease, why are you lamenting? Conceive the soul as a fountain, and these created things as rivers. While the fountain flows, the rivers run from it. Put grief out of your head and keep quaffing this river water. Do not think of the water failing, for this water is without end. Earthly love and the love divine. 'Twere better that the spirit which wears not true love as a garment had not been. Its being is but shame. Without the dealing of love, there is no entrance to the beloved. 'Tis love and the lover that live to all eternity. Set not thy heart on aught else, 'tis only borrowed. How long wilt thou embrace a dead beloved? Embrace the soul which is embraced by nothing. What was born of spring dies in autumn. Love's rose plot hath no aiding from the early spring. The House of Love. This is the Lord of Heaven who resembles Venus and the moon. This is the House of Love which has no bound or end. Like a mirror, the soul has received thy image in its heart. The tip of thy curl has sunk into my heart like a comb. Forasmuch as the women cut their hands in Joseph's presence, come to me, O soul, for the beloved is in the midst. God only. None but God has contemplated the beauty of God. This eye and that lamp are two lights, each individual. When they came together, no one distinguished them. The Finding of the Beloved. I was on that day when the names were not, nor any sign of existence endowed with name. By me names and named were brought to view, on the day when there was not I and we. For a sign, the tip of the beloved's curl became a centre of revelation. As yet the tip of that curl was not. Cross and Christians, from end to end I surveyed, he was not on the cross. I went to the idol temple, to the ancient pagoda. No trace was visible there. I went to the mountains of Herat and Kandahar. I looked. He was not in that hill and dale. I gazed into my own heart. There I saw him. He was nowhere else. The Moon Soul and the Sea. At morning tide a moon appeared in the sky, and descended from the sky and gazed on me. Like a falcon which snatches a bird at the time of hunting, that moon snatched me up and coursed over the sky. When I looked at myself, I saw myself no more, because in that moon my body became by grace, even as soul. When I travelled in soul, I saw naught save the moon, till the secret of the eternal theophany was revealed. The 9 spheres of heaven were all merged in that moon. The vessel of my being was completely hidden in the sea. The sea broke into waves, and again wisdom rose and cast abroad a voice. So it happened, and thus it befell. Foamed the sea, and at every foam fleck something took figure, and something was bodied forth. Every foam fleck of body which received a sign from that sea melted straightway and turned to spirit in this ocean. Selections from Rumi's Masnavi. Sorrow quenched in the beloved. Through grief my days are as labour and sorrow. My days move on, hand in hand with anguish. Yet though my days vanish thus, 'tis no matter. Do thou abide, O incomparable pure one. The Music of Love. Hail to thee then, O love, sweet madness, thou who healest all our infirmities, who art the physician of our pride and self-conceit, who art our Plato and our Galen. Love exalts our earthly bodies to heaven and makes the very hills to dance with joy. O lover, 'twas love that gave life to Mount Sinai, when it quaked and Moses fell down in a swoon. Did my beloved only touch me with his lips, I too, like a flute, would burst out into melody. When the rose has faded. When the rose has faded and the garden is withered, the song of the nightingale is no longer to be heard. The beloved is all in all, the lover only veils him. The beloved is all that lives, the lover a dead thing. When the lover feels no longer love's quickening, he becomes like a bird who has lost its wings. Alas! How can I retain my senses about me when the beloved shows not the light of his countenance? The silence of love. Love is the astrolabe of God's mysteries. A lover may hanker after this love or that love, but at the last he is drawn to the King of love. However much we describe and explain love, when we fall in love, we are ashamed of our words. Explanation by the tongue makes most things clear, but love unexplained is better. Earthly love essential to the love divine. In one 'twas said, leave power and weakness alone. Whatever withdraws thine eyes from God is an idol. In one 'twas said, quench not thy earthly torch, that it may be a light to lighten mankind. If thou neglectest regard and care for it, thou wilt quench at midnight the lamp of union. The eternal splendor of the beloved. Why dost thou flee from the cries of us on earth? Why pourest thou sorrow on the heart of the sorrowful? O thou who, as each new morn dawns from the east, art seen uprising anew like a bright fountain. What excuse makest thou for thy witcheries? O thou whose lips are sweeter than sugar, thou that ever renewest the life of this old world, hear the cry of this lifeless body and heart. Woman. Woman is a ray of God, not a mere mistress. The Creator's self, as it were, not a mere creature. The Divine Union. Mustafa became beside himself at that sweet call. His prayer failed on the night of the early morning halt. He lifted not head from that blissful sleep, so that his morning prayer was put off till noon. On that, his wedding night, in the presence of his bride, his pure soul attained to kiss her hands. Love and mistress are both veiled and hidden. Impute it not a fault if I call him bride. He knows about it all. He who is from head to foot a perfect rose or lily, to him spring brings rejoicing. The useless thorn desires the autumn, that autumn may associate itself with the garden and hide the rose's beauty and the thorn's shame, that men may not see the bloom of the one and the other's shame. That common stone and pure ruby may appear all as one. True, the gardener knows the difference in the autumn, but the sight of one is better than the world's sight. Resignation, the way to perfection. Whoso recognizes and confesses his own defects is hastening in the way that leads to perfection. But he advances not towards the Almighty who fancies himself to be perfect. Love the source of light rather than vanishing form. Whatsoever is perceived by sense he annuls, but he establishes that which is hidden from the senses. The lover's love is visible, his beloved hidden. The friend is absent, the distraction he causes present. Renounce these affections for outward forms. Love depends not on outward form or face. Whatever is beloved is not a mere empty form, whether your beloved be of the earth or heaven. Whatever is the form you have fallen in love with, why do you forsake it the moment life leaves it? The form is still there, whence then this disgust at it? Ah, lover, consider well what is really your beloved. If a thing perceived by outward senses is the beloved, then all who retain their senses must still love it. And since love increases constancy, how can constancy fail while form abides? But the truth is, the sun's beams strike the wall, and the wall only reflects that borrowed light. Why give your heart to mere stones, O simpleton? Go, seek the source of light which shineth always. The religion of love. The sect of lovers is distinct from all others. Lovers have a religion and a faith of their own. Though the ruby has no stamp, what matters it? Love is fearless in the midst of the sea of fear. Pain is a treasure. Pain is a treasure, for it contains mercies. The kernel is soft when the rind is scraped off. O brother, the place of darkness and cold is the fountain of life and the cup of ecstasy. So also is endurance of pain and sickness and disease. For from abasement proceeds exaltation. The spring seasons are hidden in the autumns, and the autumns are charged with springs. Spirit greater than form. If spiritual manifestations had been sufficient, the creation of the world had been needless and vain. If spiritual thought were equivalent to love of God, outward forms of temples and prayers would not exist. The beloved compared to a sweet garden. We bow down our heads before his edict and ordinance. We stake precious life to gain his favor. While the thought of the beloved fills our hearts, all our work is to do him service and spend life for him. Wherever he kindles his destructive torch, myriads of lovers' souls are burnt therewith. The lovers who dwell within the sanctuary are moths, burnt with the torch of the beloved's face. O heart, haste thither, for God will shine upon you, and seem to you a sweet garden instead of a terror. He will infuse into your soul a new soul, so as to fill you like a goblet with wine. Take up your abode in his soul. Take up your abode in heaven, O bright, full moon. Like the heavenly scribe, he will open your heart's book, that he may reveal mysteries unto you. The love of the beloved. No lover ever seeks union with his beloved, but his beloved is also seeking union with him. But the lover's love makes his body lean, while the beloved's love makes her fair and lusty. When in this heart the lightning spark of love arises, be sure this love is reciprocated in that heart. When the love of God arises in thy heart, without doubt God also feels love for thee. The influence of Sufism. This love here forms the center which expands on all sides and into all regions. Hegel. Although Jalaluddin Rumi lived for 50 years in a Turkish city, he scarcely ever used any Turkish words, but nevertheless his influence on Turkish poetry was very considerable. The Turkish poets of that day poured forth innumerable spiritual couplets of a mystical nature. Indeed, nearly all the Ottoman poets were either Sufis or men who wrote after the manner of the Persian Sufis. Jalal's son, Sultan Valad, wrote in Turkish the following concerning his father. What ye well Mevlana is of saints the pole, whatsoever thing he saith, do in whole. All his words are mercies from the heavenly King, such that blind folks' eyes were opened did they sing. The Sufi influence on Turkish poetry many years after Jalal's death gradually weakened as time went on, and their poetry became less mystical. The French were probably responsible for this change to a certain extent. Then again, Sufism influenced the poetry of India, but in this case there was influence on both sides, and the Sufis probably borrowed some of the Buddhistic ideas, especially in regard to their later conception of divine absorption. The following remark of Abu Bahu al-Shibli certainly points to the belief that the Sufis inculcated certain ideas from the Vedanta philosophy. Tasawwuf is control of the faculties and observance of the breaths. Sufi poetry has greatly influenced Western thought. Many of the German mystics wrote as the Sufi poets had written before them. Particularly might be mentioned Eckhart, Tauler, and Suso. Concerning the last mentioned, I may quote the following passage to demonstrate my meaning. Earthly friends must need endure to be distinct and separate from those whom they love. But thou, O fathomless sweetness of all true love, meltest into the heart of thy beloved, and pourest thyself fully into the essence of his soul, that nothing of thee remains outside. But thou art joined and united most lovingly with thy beloved. There was rapturous language both with the Persian and German mystics. The great difference between them was that the German mystics, for the most part, were ascetics. The Persians were not. Then again, in the 19th century, Hegel was loud in his praise of Jalaluddin Rumi, calling him a great thinker as well as a great poet. But somehow he seems to put Jalal's pantheism first, his mysticism second. Surely this was putting the cart before the horse. To trace the scope of the influence of Sufi thought in England would be extremely interesting, but the limits of this little book will not admit of our doing so. The influence was at first among the few, but optimistic lovers of the East believe that Oriental thought is daily becoming of more interest to Western minds. The student knows that Edward Fitzgerald's rendering of Omar Khayyam was anything but a faithful translation, that Fitzgerald shook up Omar's words like so many dice and set them to the music of wine, roses, and pessimism. The Omar Khayyam Club read Fitzgerald, but not Omar Khayyam, and in consequence they have fallen into the error of associating Omar with Bacchus. But nevertheless, we must be grateful to Fitzgerald. He has given us a great poem, and stirred, let us hope, many of his countless readers to a more faithful study of Persian poetry. The indefatigable Dr. Johnson has written the following on the Persian poet who is the subject of our present volume. He makes plain to the pilgrim the secrets of the way of unity and unveils the mysteries of the path of eternal truth. Concerning our modern poets, I have quoted elsewhere a few lines of Mr. Arthur Symons on A Dancing Dervish. Many of the late Thomas Lake Harris's poems are of a Sufi nature. In Mr. Stephen Phillips' beautiful poem Marpessa, the following lines are full of Siddhi mysticism. For they, seeking that perfect face beyond the world, approach in vision earthly semblances, and touch, and at the shadows flee away. It is interesting to note that at least one celebrated Englishman adopted the Sufi teaching. I refer to Sir Richard Burton. The Sufis believed heart and soul in the beautiful lines of Camions, the poet for whom Burton had so great an affection. Do what thy manhood bids thee do, from none but self expect applause. He noblest lives and noblest dies, who makes and keeps his self-made laws. All other life is living death, a world where none but phantoms dwell, a breath, a wind, a sound, a voice, a tinkling of the camel bell. Analysis of the religion of love. Put away the tale of love that travellers tell. Do thou serve God with all thy might. Jalaluddin Rumi. Sufism, then, is the religion of love. Lafcadio Hearn tells us in his inimitable way that earthly love is brought about by the memories of innumerable loves in the past, a host of the phantoms of you seeking in your momentary ego the joy of love over again. Schopenhauer, with much pride, quotes Rochefoucauld as having said that love may be compared to a ghost, since it is something we talk about but have never seen. Precisely. But this is no antagonistic statement as Schopenhauer supposed. Rather than belittling the beauty of love, it is an unconscious defense of a very great truth. Love can only be compared with love. There is nothing else to compare it with. No one has seen love because no one has seen God. A little child plays at funerals and tenderly buries a dead butterfly, not because it understands the mystery of death, but because love prompted the action, and so we love without knowing the why and the wherefore. Scientists have already proved that first love is not controlled by either of the individuals loving, that it is but the expression of thousands of tendencies in past lives. That love can be ever personal, ever limited to the individual, is unthinkable. We must recognize some day that those countless tendencies, those strivings after men and women seeming to hold our soul's affinities, were but the momentary finding of God in his creatures. We do not love a woman merely because she is pretty, possesses a pleasing mannerism. We love her because, in an indescribable way, she sings a song we alone can fully understand, a voice that lifts up our soul and makes it strong. We follow that invisible figure from land to land, from heart to heart, from death into life, on and on. When love loves love for its own sake, when the self is dead, we shall meet him. We shall find the beloved to be the perfection, the realization of that strong desire that made us lose ourselves in others. The more we lose ourselves in God, the more we find him. Men and women love and die. But love is a divine essence working through and through innumerable lives for its own eternal glory. Personality is limited only to the finite world, perhaps a phase or two beyond the grave. Even that is the sum total of countless so-called personalities in the past. We love instinctively. If it was wholly physical, then it dies with the death of the object. If it was infinitely more than that, if it was the love of goodness and purity and the beautiful, it lives on forever. But these things live not eternally in humanity. They are parts of that all-pervading essence, the love divine. Love God's light in men and women, and not the lanterns through which it shines, for human bodies must turn to dust. Human memories, human desires fade away. But the love of the all-good, all-beautiful remains, and when such is found in earthly love, it is God finding himself in you, and you in him. That is the supreme teaching of Sufism, the religion of love.